Welcome to Takeology with your three boys in the lab so you can do the cooking. I hope we're having a great day. Thanksgiving week, tons of food lined up, tons of football lined up. But most importantly, we got my boy Matt in the building. How are you doing?
Dude, it's Thanksgiving. So much to be thankful for. The Chiefs won again. What more can we ask for?
We'll talk about that game soon. My God, win is a strong word to say in that game. So I don't know, but they did
That's
win.
that's what I keep hearing. That's what I keep hearing. But where in the rules does it state you have to win by a certain amount?
That's fair.
I I've never seen that in the rules.
A win is a win. No, you're right. You're right. At the end of the day, it's still a dub. What you're 9-1? No, 10-1.
10-1.
10-1. Oh, I had to correct myself there. Jeez, it's crazy. We're already this far in the season. Week 12 just got done with. Now going to week 13. Playoff season for most fantasy people. About this time of year, but playoffs are just right around the corner, dude. Lots of football to go, but already got lots to talk about. But I'm glad we're back. It's been a little bit, huh? All of our
Yeah,
followers, have missed us. So
the endless amount.
we're famous. But no, it's good to be back. We could talk football, honestly, probably every day for hours, knowing us.
Can't
Or just
don't
sports in
get
general.
tired of it.
No, dude, it's so good. That's why we got to watch this timer in the corner. Because if we don't, we'll be here for too long.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we're here. So let's just jump right in with a little lab report. We got a little bit of news. I believe Jake Ferguson, nothing crazy. Jake Ferguson will probably be out again this weekend, right? Concussion. Austin Eckler, concussion. There's a possibility Brian Robinson might not be playing this weekend, which brings up Jeremy McNichols. Is that right? Jeremy McNichols, I believe is his name. Good little
Yeah.
stream.
Yeah. Actually a pretty big one because the
Yeah.
running back room for the Commanders has been. I mean, and you called it before the season. I mean, it's a pretty valuable running back room. So if they're missing, he's an automatic start. He might not be a running back one, but he's at least a two. This
Yeah.
offense is good. So if he's on the waiver wire, pick him up, especially if both running backs in that room are going to miss. He's going to be a great play.
You can start him almost immediately. Now, I do want to say this, and it's really important. There's no teams on a bye. Next week is the Armageddon, right? We're 6 teams on a bye. Huge, huge week to be dealing with players. So honestly, it's like now it's the time to stash somebody for next week. Honestly, so be looking towards that. Another big news. This one's kind of crazy. Daniel Jones is no longer a New York Giant. We've been a little bit. I think it was last week this happened. What the heck, dude? I did not see this coming at all. I mean, how do you feel about this?
I, so the if you we talked about it last podcast, he had the stipulation in his contract to where if he got hurt, 23 million guaranteed was kicking into his contract. So I know it kind of takes people by surprise, but they did this for a reason. That's a really expensive bench warmer,
Yeah.
and if you were to play him and he got hurt, that's just 23 million more you have to pay him. And I heard a report today. There's 4 teams that are interested in him, and they would offer him like immediately. So he kind of has a choice to go to one of these teams. The teams are the Ravens, the Niners, Miami, and Minnesota. And I know that sounds kind of weird,
Yeah.
but the Ravens, they're an offense that he can run. It's a running quarterback already, so that's something that he has excelled at, and so he could fit in there. Miami, we obviously know the Tua injuries, so their backup quarterbacks are terrible. So he would automatically just be their running or their quarterback too. And then with Minnesota, Sam Darnold has played good enough this year that he's going to get a contract somewhere else next year. And they've already invested in McCarthy, their rookie. So there's really they're not going to sign Darnold back. So that's a situation he could come in and start immediately next year. So
Fair.
he's pretty much said that he only wants to go to teams that are Super Bowl bound or have the potential. And then with the Niners, Brock Purdy, his shoulder injury, it's looking more severe as days go by. He's already had 2 MRIs on it, and nothing has came out about those MRIs. So that kind of points to it may be more serious than people might think.
Yeah. I mean, you don't trust in Brandon Allen?
I mean, I'm a Hogs guy, but he looked pretty terrible against the
Did look
Packers. So if I was them, I would be calling Daniel. Not that he's amazing, but he's definitely better than Brandon Allen.
Danny Dimes, baby. Where do you think he should go?
I mean, if he's wanting to play, it depends. If he wants a Super Bowl ring, obviously probably the Ravens is their best choice. But if he's wanting the best opportunity to play, McCarthy just had another surgery on his knee, so it's looking like a more serious long term injury. So the Vikings, and then in my opinion, Miami, because we know Tua, we
Yeah.
know he's one hit away from maybe being out of the league. So one of those two options. Maybe the 49ers if Brock's injury is worse than people think because their backup is nothing special. I think they have Joshua Dobbs over there, so I don't know.
In Dobbs, we trust. I'm down for some Joshua Dobbs, dude.
Yeah,
The engineer. D-
Dobbs and but Dobbs and Brandon just aren't it, so they got to find someone else.
no. Do you think he's a legit quarterback? Like, do you think New York Giants made like a bad move in terms of quarterback play?
It's tough because they didn't surround him with much at the Giants. But I mean, we've kind of seen the best of Daniel Jones a couple years ago when he got this contract. I don't think he's just a franchise quarterback, but he is 5 times better than most of these backup quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So I think any good team that doesn't have a solidified guy at the backup position for quarterback, I think they should sign him immediately because he's better than probably 75% of the backups in this league. So there's a lot of teams that want him. He's just narrowed it down to the 4. So we'll kind of see where he goes. If I was a guessing man, the Niners are the one that he's reported to want to go to the most. Um, I mean, and that's a good team. And if Brock's injury is bad, then he has a potential to automatically come in and start. So I would guess the 49ers or Miami.
You got to think about this too. If Brock Purdy went somewhere else, I know it's probably not likely, but Brock Purdy is a free agent after this year. He could go anywhere, right? So
Yeah,
imagine Daniel Jones next year is your starting quarterback for the 49ers because Brock Purdy went to God knows where, you know?
I mean, they probably wouldn't feel great about that, but
No, but
um,
it's possible,
yeah,
right?
it's possible.
Hey, predicting the future here. We'll see. We'll see. But it is what it is. Speaking of quarterbacks, though, there was a rumor that Aaron Rodgers might not be with the Jets for much longer, but it does look like he'll be starting this Sunday. Although that's crazy to even think like, yeah, Aaron Rodgers has just fumbled the bag. He's not the same quarterback. This team should be so much better. They kind of went through it. Fired their head coach, fired their GM. Lots of things going on over there. It was their GM, right? They fired. It was the OC?
Yeah, they fired their GM and then they fired their coach. I mean, that was a couple weeks ago now, but
Yeah, but
yeah,
just
it's
the
it's a
Jets.
it's a weird situation. It Their owner he wanted to bench Aaron. It came out week 2, so I mean, he's not loved in the building. So it's weird. Aaron says he wants to play next year, just not for the Jets. So I don't know, but what other team is going to sign him? He has looked terrible this year.
He's
So
been he's
I
lost a step.
this is not the way you normally see Hall of Famers go out. It's just not the normal trajectory that they take at the end of their careers. But I'm on tape. I don't like him, so I don't care. I don't care if he gets benched and is out of the league. He gets on my nerves.
He's kind of a baby, but we won't spend too
The
much time on
biggest.
Rodgers. We're not too
Yeah.
big. I'm not a big fan of him either. Really, he got one Super Bowl, a few MVPs. Doesn't matter. And then Josh Downs reportedly will not be playing this weekend. Not that that's crazy news, but honestly, a lot of people have used Josh Downs. He's kind of popped off when Joe Flacco was in. With Anthony Richardson, whole different world. Didn't play too hot this last weekend. The weekend before he did, but week 11 it wasn't too great. So other than that, J.K. Dobbins is another big one. He could be hip injury, I believe, is what it is. He could be out, which means the Gus Bus. How are we feeling about
Yeah,
the
I
Gus?
mean, say what you want about him. He's going to get the work. So this is
Yeah,
a good offense. We kind of saw that last night. So if he's the starter and they really don't have anything past him, So if he's going to get all the work, he's a play that you could definitely put in your starting lineup. And then I was going to say Zamir White, he's still hurt, as
Yep.
well as Alexander Madison. So their backup did great this past week.
Amir Abdullah.
Yeah, he's got a really hard name to say, but yeah, it's a really tough matchup because they're going to play against the Chiefs, and we're really good against the run. So he's still a play, but I would temper your expectations. He'll be like a running back 2 or 3 coming off this hot week. But McNichols is definitely the top one I would look at.
Yeah, I agree with you. I definitely agree. And if there's other people out there that are just like shouldn't be out there, go pick them up. Because trade deadlines either are done or they will be done after this week for sure. I know ours ends the 27th, is what it's looking like for us.
Yeah, a big name as far as picking up on the waivers. He's probably gone, but Taysom Hill, the tight ends have been struggling. Besides a couple solidified guys, but if Taysom Hill's still out there, throw everything you got at him. If it's a fab league, throw all your fab at him. If it's just priority, hope you have the highest because he is. There's not many tight ends in the league that can score 30 points,
Yeah,
and he's done it multiple times, so he would be an automatic pickup.
which is crazy to me. Just the way he's utilized in football is it's crazy. No other player gets that kind of usage in
I
every
mean,
different.
this is a 34-year-old we're talking about, and he
Yeah,
is just popping off. So it's definitely impressive. They utilize him in so many ways. There's not many guys that can come on and throw a ball, rush a ball, and catch a ball.
yeah.
All dude, he's a
Dog.
fantastic player. He's
Hall,
really good.
maybe Hall of Famer. I don't know. No, probably not. But
Well, definitely not. Definitely not.
hey, just hey, love Taysom Hill. Shout out some love to the man. It is what it is. All right. Well, we're gonna switch it up today. Usually, when we're here on a Monday or Tuesday, we're recapping the entire league. Right? We sit here and we talk about all the games. We're gonna switch it up a little bit today. Okay. Got a new system. We're gonna talk about your top scorers of the week, and that'll come with a little bit of a few people who dropped the ball. Okay. Because it's just, there's highs and there's lows. Let me tell you. And I don't want to talk about the lows because I experienced a little bit of them. But just to shout out, I'm in the playoffs, boys. I'm in playoff contention here. I fought for it in both leagues, and we're there. So, well, almost. I can't. I don't want to get too excited. It can be lost. So, 2 more games facing Matt here this week. We'll see how this goes. I'm coming for you. So it is what it is. But I
Hey,
wanted to
if I,
start. Go
if
ahead.
I'm gonna lose, I'd love for it to be to you.
You know what? I'll take that. Win or lose, I respect it. And same to you. So you know what? Either way, if it means I don't make the playoffs, it was a good ride. All right. But speaking of a man that has helped me out all year, which I wish I just would have went for him as quarterback. We're going to start with our quarterbacks. We're going to go through top 5. But number 1 of that list is Jaden Daniels. He had a little bit of a slump there. Kind of looked like, okay, maybe this hip injury has affected him. But popped off for 30 fantasy points. Did he win the game? No, he did not win the game. And of all people, the Cowboys beat him. Talk to me about it. I think obviously big part of this came from the 86-yard touchdown to Terry McLaurin. That was a huge piece. But he did have 3 total touchdowns. So 2 through the air and 1 through the ground. How do you feel about Mr. Jaden Daniels here? Top of the
Yeah,
list.
it was a super odd game because he was struggling mightily until the fourth quarter, and then it kind of just bursted open for him. That especially with the Terry touchdown.
Mm.
That was just a complete collapse from the Cowboys defense. But that's nothing against Jaden. You take the opportunities when they come. But I think what you're so excited to see with Jaden is the rushing. It came back this game. He
Yeah.
was kind of going through a streak where he wasn't rushing the ball as much, and that was probably because of the injury he took to the ribs. But he came back. He rushed for 75 yards this game, threw
Mm-hmm.
for 275, 2 touchdowns, and also rushed for a touchdown. Uh, you can't ask for more from a quarterback in fantasy football. I've touched on it a little bit how much I hate the rushing stats for quarterbacks just because they're so inflated in fantasy football. But you have to take advantage of them, and with a quarterback like Jaden Daniels, that's such a big aspect of his game, and it just makes it to where he's a automatic start every single week. And this offense kind of looked like it was on a downward spiral, but they looked good this game when it came down to the end. they really, I know they lost this game, but it was kind of due to a missed extra point that
Yeah.
led to the
Austin Seaver.
onside kick attempt. So, I mean, they played a good game. The Cowboys are not a good team, but in division like this, they're always going to be competitive. So, I don't think the Commanders should feel bad about this game. Missed kicks happen, and that's just kind of what happened this game.
Yeah, Austin Seaver was going through injury designation for 2 games. I think he was out. So it's like, okay, he's coming back. It is what it is. But I did want to say this defense looked a little bit better for a while there. And so I believe they're kind of this defense is starting to look like it we once did a little bit more. So be on the lookout for the Dallas Cowboys defense on waiver. I believe they got the Giants this weekend, so that could be a good pickup there to stream him against Mr. Tommy DeVito. He gives up sacks like crazy, even if it's a good line or not, which the Giants don't have the greatest. So they could be a good stream. I did want to throw that out there for the Cowboys.
Yeah, for
And,
sure. And you mentioned Jake Ferguson probably being out again,
mhm,
and the Schoon man. He didn't have a ton of receptions or yards, but he did get in the end zone. And
yep.
the tight end is a valuable position for the Cowboys. So if you're struggling at tight end and maybe Taysom Hill's not on the waiver wire or any other guys, Schoon man's definitely a guy that you can pick up and play because this. I mean, say what you want about the Cowboys, they're a decent offense even without Dak. So, I mean, he's going to get targeted, and the tight ends are targeted heavily in the red zone. So, he could be a guy that you could pick up.
They'll be competitive. They're not going to want to lose games, I don't think, no matter what. And Cooper Rush really is not that bad. I mean, to throw for 247, and the Commanders' defense has looked better this year. So that's not bad. It's not bad.
Yeah, he had a 117 rating this game. So, I don't think he's a guy that you can play in like a redraft one man quarterback league. But if you're in a double quarterback league, he's definitely a guy that you could pick up. And I mean, he may have a dud game, but against the Giants, I think he'll be all right.
I agree with you. All right, running number 2 of this list, Mr. Patrick Mahomes. Well, this came out of nowhere. After looking, well, not really. I mean, He's had 3 touchdowns the last 2 games. Is that right?
Yeah, three out of the five last games, he's thrown 3 touchdowns.
Crazy. They're looking good. They're the number 1 team out there. That's why. But he finally is kind of fantasy relevant, and their schedule kind of only is easier in some ways. I mean, they have Las Vegas and they've got the Chargers coming up. But still, it's not a bad schedule for the rest of the season. So Patrick Mahomes is a guy that you can probably start now over a lot of different people because he looks like he's got some weapons. And they're only coming back little by little, speaking of Mr. Pacheco. But he had 269 yards, 3 touchdowns, and the biggest piece to this is the 60 yards on the ground, I thought. That he actually, we forget that Patrick Mahomes is a running man a lot of times. This man's got some legs. So touch on this, Mr. Patrick Mahomes, and then when we get back to me, I have a few other things to talk about here. So,
I mean, people were getting to the point where they were. I mean, he was dropped in our league. He was
yep.
traded in a lot of other leagues, and rightfully so. We were becoming a team, especially when we signed Kareem Hunt, of run first, and I think that's due to a lot of we're trying to save Travis Kelsey, we're trying to save Hopkins, we're trying to save all these older guys until the playoffs, but when we're not having as much success rushing the ball as we have the past couple of weeks, he's just a quarterback that when it needs to be done, he's going to get it done. And we got the ball back with a minute and a half, tied with the Panthers. And even if you're not a Chiefs fan, I think everybody knew that we were going to win that game. And Patrick does not rush the ball a ton, but on these third downs or crucial downs, he rushes the ball at a very high rate, and he's very successful doing it. He's not the fastest guy, but when he needs it to be done, he does it. And with coming into this home stretch, we're getting Pacheco back, as you said,
Yeah.
but I think they're going to definitely ease him in. So I think the passing rate's going to keep the same level, if not go up. So I think Patrick's going to be a guy that you can start for these next 2 weeks with confidence. I
Yep.
truly do. And there's been talks that we're going to get Hollywood Brown back before the regular season's over. So if that's the case, I mean, you've got 3 legit wide receivers as well as 2 legit tight ends. Noah Gray has kind of came on the scene. He's had 2 touchdowns the last 2 games. And if you're struggling at tight end, that's another guy. He's not just going to rack up a bunch of receptions, but he is utilized in the red zone. unlike any player on the Chiefs offense. It's almost, I mean, all the attention is going to Hopkins, Travis Kelsey, and even Kareem Hunt. He gets a lot of attention down there as well. So if he's going to be utilized like this in the red zone, he's a guy that you can play and just kind of hope for the touchdown. And if you're looking at these last 2 weeks, you don't normally like to chase touchdowns, but he's been utilized heavily. And if you're
Oh, yeah.
struggling, that's a guy that you can definitely play.
I mean, they're going to get to the end zone, and they're playing a two tight end set a ton this year. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is out there, but more times than not, they've got Mr. Noah Gray out there lined up too. So, and he was the tight end 3 on our list this week with 23 fantasy points, two touchdowns, back-to-back games. Is that right?
Yeah, and not only is he utilized down there, he's on the field 80% of the time. And if you're on the field with Patrick Mahomes, great things are going to
Oh
happen.
yeah,
So, I mean, if you're struggling, I can't say it enough. He's a guy that you can play.
yeah. Just based on boom, the opportunity that he's on a good team and he'll get you something out there, right? But speaking of this Chiefs game against the Panthers are kind of they hung with the Chiefs. Bryce Young's not looking as bad as we thought, right? So I thought this was kind of interesting. Obviously, Jonathan Brooks only got 2 carries. That's kind of nothing to talk about, really. But if Bryce Young can continue to play at least decent like this, there could be a reason to start some of these receivers, right? David Moore, I don't know about him, right? Don't know. But aside from that, because it's not too crazy, do you think Kareem Hunt is worth another start for one more week? One
Yeah,
more. What do you think?
I, I would love to say yes because, as you know, I have him on my team.
Right.
And we do have the Raiders coming up, who are not a very strong defense or a strong team as a whole. But I was talking to you about this before the podcast. I really think Kareem Hunt is a guy that has to get all the work to be relative or to be successful in fantasy. This past game, he had 16 carries and he averaged 4 yards a carry, but it only amounted to 68 yards. So if he's not getting in the end zone, he's just not a pass catching back. That's not how we utilize him. When we're in passing downs, Samaje Perine comes in, and now that Pacheco's coming back, I really think it's going to be a situation where Kareem is just on the short yardage situations. He's going to get us the first down, and then Pacheco's going to come in to be the more explosive running back. And then on third down, it's either going to be Pacheco or Samaje. I think Kareem Hunt is going to be his work's going to be at least split in half, and I just don't think he's going to be successful enough on the ground. He's just not an explosive player. And don't get me wrong, he's played great since we signed him. I can't say enough good things about him, but he's at the stage of his career where he's just not going to have explosive plays anymore. And if he's only out there for these short yardage downs, the defense is going to load the box against him. So I just don't think there's going to be much opportunity unless he gets a goal line touch. But as you've seen these past few weeks, we're throwing the ball a ton in the red zone. And then with Pacheco coming back, he's been a hoss in the red zone.
Yeah.
So I just don't think there's going to be much opportunity for him. Nothing against the player. It's just when you're in a split backfield like this, your production goes way down.
Yeah. Unless you're the Lions.
Yeah, and,
Really about it.
unless you're the Lions, yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation. But I kind of agree with you. I mean, when you picked up Kareem Hunt, you knew it was a short term in terms of you're going to have him only when Pacheco's kind of not on the field. And in my opinion, I really think you have at least one more game with Kareem Hunt, bare minimum, where it's kind of like, okay, do they kind of work him in a little bit, and then from then on, he's good to go. I mean, it's a risk nonetheless because if he's available and they want to use him, they will because he's a dog. But at least maybe one game, give or take. I would maybe
It's definitely possible. You've seen the Chiefs have been very hesitant at putting these players back in the game after they've come off injuries. You've kind of seen that with Pacheco. You've seen that with Charles Omenihu, our defensive end. They were ready to come back last week, if not the week before, but they're just really hesitant to do it just because we're 10-1. Even if we lose these next couple games, there's really no effect besides the Bills possibly catching us, but we're a game ahead of them as well. So I don't think there's enough benefit to bring these guys back in a hurry. So with that being said, Kareem could have one more good week. It's just it's a really risky start because if you're trying to make the playoffs, and you're putting a guy in your lineup that you don't necessarily know is going to get all the work, which he needs, you're opening the door for a very low week for him. And that, I mean, at this point of the playoffs, or I mean of the fantasy year, that's very dangerous to do when some teams need to win.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. Be secure in who you're starting, and prepare now as a Kareem Hunt owner. Not that I have him, but prepare now for him being gone on your team, right? I know for you, you've kind of got a deep running back room, but if you don't, you need to say, okay, how do I make this deeper? Because I'm going to lose this guy in a week or two.
Yeah.
Next guy on the list of our quarterbacks' top 5 fantasy point scores, Tua Tagovailoa. Huh? What about that guy, man? 28 fantasy points, 4 touchdowns. Now, this ties into one of our top 5 receivers in fantasy points. You'd think it's Tyreek Hill, but let me tell you, you're wrong. It's Jalen Waddle. So we're going to talk about these two guys for a minute. Mr. Tua, 4 touchdowns, 317 yards against a pretty decent secondary in the Patriots. Christian Gonzalez, obviously. That's probably why Tyreek Hill didn't get a lot of this work anyways. But I was surprised to see 2 of these touchdowns came through the air to Mr. Devon Achane. What a dog, right? Glad he's doing well again. But really the highlight here is Jalen Waddle finally looks like the Jalen Waddle he once was. So I want you to talk about that, and then I have a question for you about these Dolphins team. Okay? So talk to me
Yeah.
about Jalen Waddle and Tua.
So Tua, we know he can do this. The Dolphins have been struggling recently on offense, is what the kind of common perception is. But I mean, they've put up 25 plus points in the games Tua's been back, and he has been good. I think he's just a little tentative with, I mean, as anybody would when you're struggling this much with concussions. But kind of going on the just Dolphins as a whole, I know you have Tyreek Hill, and you've been disappointed with his performance.
Yeah,
And
it's bad.
I really think a ton of that is due to Jonnu Smith. This guy has came on, and since week 8, he's in the top 5 for tight ends, and he's also in the top 5 scoring for his position this week, along with Jalen Waddle. And
Yep.
I think that's just kind of the tough part with this offense. The only guy that you can pretty much say is consistently going to put up points every single week is Devon Achane. This game, he didn't even have success rushing the ball. But when you're catching the ball at the rate he is, and especially in the red zone, he is one of their most highly targeted guy in the red zone. And it seems like every single week you can count on a reception touchdown from him. And then with Jonnu Smith's emergence on this team, there's just a limited amount of balls that can go to these receivers. And this week it was Jalen Waddle who is the beneficiary, but next week it might be Tyreek Hill, and everybody's down on Tyreek at the moment. And just on him for a moment, I think that wrist injury might be hampering him more than they're letting on. Um, but yeah, the Dolphins are a good offense as a whole. It's just tough to trust these 2 wide receivers because before this game, Jalen Waddle had been terrible, and he finally had a good game here. But most people had either traded him or dropped him or cut him. I mean, he's had
Yeah.
a just outright terrible season. And then he has the emergence here, and everybody's down on Tyreek. It could be Tyreek's week next week. So it's a tough offense to pick who's going to have the big week, with the exception of Jonnu Smith and Achan. Those guys have pretty much proven that they are going to be highly targeted and highly productive in this offense on a week to week basis.
That's a good point. It's definitely hard to pick these guys. I did forget about Jonas Smith. He's number 2 in our top 5 of tight ends. So 3 of our top 5 studs of this week, right, are from the Dolphins. Crazy to think. And you'd think one of them's Tyreek Hill, but he's not, which is insane. I wanted to talk about this real quick too, because this team has the potential to just be an electric offense, a crazy good offense. They have a chance at the playoffs, although if they don't win this next game, huge game to win against Green Bay. They're kind of really out of it. So they got to win this game. But guess where they're going to play? They're going to play at Green Bay. Well, last time I checked, it's November. Okay. What happens outside November? Well, it gets cold. Okay. Especially in places like Green Bay. So I present a question to you because I had Tyreek Hill, and I don't trust the guy one bit. Honestly, anybody who has Tyreek Hill, if they have a good receiver room, is a question of do I even start this guy? Okay. It's supposed to be super cold in Green Bay this weekend when they play, or they play Friday, I think, right? Oh, it was Tua known for playing good in the cold, Matt?
He is not.
I'm pretty sure he's 0-11 in cold games. Okay. So they're also playing Green Bay, who has not allowed a lot of fancy points to receivers. They've got a pretty decent secondary defense, tons of interceptions, not a lot of yards, not a lot of touchdowns. Do you start Tyreek Hill this weekend? I mean, do you?
That's a very good point. We saw it last year, and we've seen it pretty much every year that Tua has been at the helm for this offense. They mightily struggle in the cold, and that really shows itself in the playoffs because of the time of year. But it's it's going to be a scary start for any Dolphins player in the cold. I think the one exception probably is Devon Achane, just because he's going to get a lot of the running work. But you're 100% right. If you have Tyreek Hill and you have a better option that maybe is more consistent on a week to week basis, I would feel fully confident or comfortable starting him this next week in place of Tyreek Hill.
Calvin
And
Ridley?
that's not yet. I mean, Calvin Ridley, since Hopkins has been gone, he's been pretty good for
He's
fantasy.
balled out.
And I mean, Tyreek Hill got six. I mean, he got 6 targets this game, so you're not necessarily disappointed with that. It's just all the explosive plays have almost vanished for Tyreek, as
Yeah.
well as the touchdowns. He had one, I think, a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But besides that, he's just not put up big weeks. So if you have a better option on the bench, like maybe Jackson Smith to Jigba, maybe one of these Bears receiver that's coming back on, it's it's just I don't think you can expect anything big from Tyreek. I think you can expect a kind of middling game that he's not going to bust by any means, but he's not going to push your team over the edge of winning that week. So it all depends on what you need. If you're coming in the week and the team you're playing is way better than you, I think you should play a more explosive player. But if you're just coming in on a level playing field, I think Tyreek is he's a safe option. He's just not going to boom for you.
Yeah.
I think that's really what it boils down to.
That's a good point. I think in my own the way I think, I got to go with Calvin Ridley, just because of the potential boom that he can have and the variables. I mean, I keep wanting to say Las Vegas. I don't know why I keep thinking they're playing them, but playing Green Bay and at their stadium in this kind of weather, to me, it's like all these variables. I don't want any of it. It's kind of like the Steelers game. I would have not started Najee Harris. I may have started George Pickens still, but if I'd have known it was snowing like crazy against the Browns and they were just going to stack the box against Najee, terrible, terrible scheme there for their offense. But besides the point, but for this, it's like in the cold they don't do well anyways, so it's almost like you don't want to start them even though they turned up this week in terms of Tua. You know, one of those tough decisions you got to make as a fantasy manager.
Yes, sir.
But next quarterback on our list of our top 5 fantasy points. I know we caught off a few with the Dolphins there, but Caleb Williams. Did not expect to see him in this list. They honestly look a lot better ever since they fired their head coach, and I believe they fired their OC as well. Is that, I think they did. I'm pretty
Yeah.
okay. I want confirmation there from you. But the man had 27 fantasy points, which also ties into Mr. DJ Moore, and don't think you see this name coming, Keenan Allen. They're two of our top 5 receivers for fantasy points. DJ Moore had 27 fantasy points, and Keenan Allen was right behind him with 24. I guess a few questions for me come from this. Number one, do you think Caleb Williams going forward can keep this fantasy production up? Number two, do you think now that they have a new coaching staff, does Keenan Allen kind of become a guy that you can start to say, I'm going to put him in a flex position because he has the potential to get the good work there? And what do you think? I know DJ Moore, he's going to get the yards and targets, but in terms of Keenan Allen being on this list of top 5 receivers, what do you think?
Yeah, so it's definitely tough. The Chicago Bears just don't have a favorable schedule coming into these next few games. They're going to be playing the Lions twice, the
Ugh.
Vikings, and then the Niners. And all those teams, I mean, the Niners have been a little bit down on defense, but they all 4 have good teams, or I mean, good defenses. And the Lions, especially, they've lost Aiden Hutchinson for the year, but they still look dominant on defense. The Vikings, they have been dominant on defense with Brian Flores as their defensive coordinator. So I just don't think you're going to have many games where Caleb Williams is throwing the ball 47 times.
Crazy.
And Keenan Allen was the recipient of 15 targets this game. And that's just not going to happen on a week to week
No.
basis. I mean, pretty much every wide receiver on this team had over 10 targets. Keenan Allen, 15. Cole Kmet, 10. Roma Dunze, 10. And then DJ Moore actually had the least amount with 7. But they're utilizing these wide receivers a lot better since the firing of their OC. DJ Moore is getting involved in the screen game, which has become very fruitful for him as far as fantasy production. He scored on a touchdown this game. If you throw the ball to him in a screen, he's got the potential to take it 80 yards to the house. He's that good of a player. And then with this new OC, Cole Kmet has finally came back on the scene, which is good if you are in need of a tight end. But that being said, Caleb Williams, he's going to be a guy that you can throw in there if you're in a pinch, just because of his rushing ability. He's rushed the ball very well since they switched OCs. I
Yeah.
just don't think this level of passing is going to continue, especially against these good defenses they have coming up. But if you're in a pinch, I think Caleb Williams is a guy that you could play, but it's going to definitely be a scary start. I think there's for sure better guys out there, but if you're in like a 12-man league and you're running thin at quarterback, he's a guy that you could play if you're really thin.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I definitely think, at least for the Lions, the one place that they can kind of give up a lot of yards is through the air. Maybe not a touchdown, right? But they do give up some yards to their corners quite often. So at least, if anything, these receivers can succeed, and maybe Caleb Williams can get them the ball. But I agree with you. I don't think this is something that will be consistent going forward, especially with the schedule that they've got going. 49ers, tough defense. Like you said, Lions, tough defense. And they play Kansas City, is that right? No.
Um, I don't believe so.
Just 49ers, Lions twice.
Let me fact check that.
Yeah, my stat man here, Mr. Matt McDonald. But
No, they don't. They don't play us.
okay, okay. But
Yeah,
with
it's
the
the Lions twice, Niners, Vikings, Seahawks, Packers.
Vikings, it really, and Seahawks may be the best games you might, in terms of stats and projections, might want to start them because he looked good against the Vikings here. But it's just crazy how we thought Caleb Williams was going to be this top guy coming in. He had the best situation to go into, and it just didn't go right this year. Bo Nix looks a little bit better out there. Just want to throw that in there. A little slide of Mr. Bo Nix. But
Yeah, I think this is a huge result of just overall coaching.
yeah, yeah.
Um, you've kind of seen the quarterbacks that have succeeded have had stabilized coaching. Just, I mean, Sean Payton, he's been in the league forever. He's won a Super Bowl. Say what you want about the Commanders coach. His name's
Cliff
I can't
Kingsbury,
remember.
the OC.
Yeah, Cliff's the OC, but I can't. Anyways, he's been a DC and a head coach in this league for a really long time. Um, the
Is it Dan
Bears
Quinn?
coach, yeah, Dan Quinn. Um, the Bears coach, he's not great. I don't know what else there is to say about him. And then with Drake May, they have the rookie head coach in there with Mayo. So I think you'll see Drake May and Caleb definitely be on the uptick next year.
Yeah,
But Bo Nix, there's nothing to take away against him. Him and Jaden have played great this year, and Bo Nix has a potential to win the Offensive Rookie of the Year if he continues it up. So you just want to look forward and hopefully he continues the success. But I think Caleb Williams and Drake May, they'll definitely be a lot better as the season ends here, and then they'll be great for next year. You just got to get Drake May some weapons. He's got nothing to work with in New England. It's a terrible situation.
really nothing at all. At least for Caleb Williams, though, you're starting DJ Moore on your. I mean, fantasy time. It looks a lot better for DJ Moore. There was kind of a slump there. I know you kind of traded for him during that time, so I know you're enjoying the benefits of this side of DJ Moore with just seven catches, 7 targets, 106 yards and a touchdown. Crazy usage when you'd think the guy who had 15 would have played better in terms of stats, but Keenan Allen did have a little bit of injury, so he's a guy to watch out for. I will say a lot of people have slept on Keenan Allen because he's been terrible all year, and he just this game, and I believe last game he had a decent game too. Nope, no, he didn't. Just this game. That's it. So he's just now coming on the rise. So be on the lookout for him, maybe, especially if they keep up his passing numbers. But I agree with you. I don't think it continues like that. All right, Last quarterback on the list, and we'll jump into some running backs here because that's really the big talk, I think, of this weekend. Mr. Lamar Jackson with 22 fantasy points. I know compared to the other guys, it's not a lot, but what a game. Can't believe the Chargers hung around as much as they did for this game. Derrick Henry's another side piece that did fantastic. He's going to do it every game. It is what it is. Derrick Henry's been a beast. But Lamar Jackson, 177 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a touchdown on the ground. Matt, do you think this man's an MVP?
I will say no. I,
Okay.
I I truly think that the MVP needs to go to Saquon. This guy has been incredible, and
Wow.
if you look at the Eagles end of the season last year, they were just in a really bad state of mind and just a bad state as a team as a whole. I mean, they started, I think it was 10-1, and then proceeded to lose 7 out of 9,
Or
and then
down.
get bounced in the first round of the playoffs to Baker Mayfield. And really, they haven't changed much besides the two corners there they drafted on defense, and then the signing of Saquon. And
Yep.
don't get me wrong, their defense has been much better, but Saquon just offers such an explosive. He literally is a he's one of the, if not the best running back in the NFL. And then if you look at the season he's having, he's on pace to break the all-time rushing record.
Yeah.
And if you do that in a season, there is no way that you cannot be the MVP, not to mention the impact he's had on the Eagles as a whole. I mean, this was a team that you thought was on a downward spiral. They might fire their coach. There was a lot of questions about Jalen Hurts. And then Saquon's just came in here and he has fixed this whole situation as a whole. So nothing to take away against Lamar. Just keep it short on him. He played good. I think you can expect him to have at least 20 points a week. I mean, he's the number one quarterback on the year. You can continue to play him. His rushing ability just propels him to the top, and he's going to be successful in fantasy every single week. But I just can't I can't under I can't understate how good of a season Saquon's having. He's been fantastic.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, that kind of essentially, I know Lamar had a decent game, and it's going to be what it is. So it's easy to jump into our number one running back here, like you stated. Saquon had 44 fantasy points, and I believe I don't know the total number, so maybe you can fact check me here, but he's had at least 5 games with 30 or more fantasy points, which is a crazy season to have. Brand new season for and honestly, I had to take a step back. At the beginning of the year, I was thinking, Saquon, I don't think it's going to be as crazy as people think. But this man has balled out. 255 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns, 47 through the air, a total of, I think, 305 total yards. That's crazy for one guy. This man, game after game, has just popped off. He has to be the MVP. He's winning people leagues, no doubt in my mind, for fantasy. I mean, this guy was. If you could get him and Derrick Henry, which was possible in this draft this year, imagine the type of team for somebody that has Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. So we can't
Yeah.
under. Yeah,
This is just one of the biggest misses as a fantasy whole from the drafting. I mean, this was a guy that we should have. He's been one of the most talented running backs in the league since he got there, and I think we've just become almost numb to him not having a ton of success at the Giants. We
yeah.
should have known when he goes to a team like the Eagles with as good of offensive line as they have that he's going to be fantastic. And there's just nothing more you can say about him. He's got 12 touchdowns on the year. He really should have around 20, 22. I mean, Jalen Hurts has stolen so many of his red zone touchdowns. And I saw a stat, he's got to the 1 yard line like 10 times. And after that, it proceeded that Jalen Hurts had a 1 yard touchdown. And
Why?
he doesn't act like it bothers him, but man, that would grind my gears. He's having an all-time season, and he's had 10 to 12 touchdowns just stolen from him. But put that aside, he's had a fantastic year. Like I said, he's on pace to break the rushing record, which is around 2,100 yards. If he can eclipse that, I don't think there's any way that he cannot be the MVP. Now, I don't necessarily know if he'll win it because it's almost become a quarterback award, but if he can somehow break that quarterback bias, I can't see a better MVP than Saquon Barkley.
Over the past 2 weeks, he's had 401 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. 2 weeks of football. and this man has 401 yards and 4 touchdowns. Just insane. The year that this man has had. Yeah, I honestly hope he does get it, just because it's like this is an insane season for the guy, especially on a brand new team. You never expect this. And Derrick Henry, I mean, we can't understate he's had a good season too, but Saquon's the guy this year. Next running back on the list, number 2. You called this a few weeks ago. We need to get on record and write it down. Mr. Josh Jacobs. I want to tell the chat here. I know we're not streaming. Well, we are streaming live. I guess that's true. I traded him for Travis Etienne back in like week 3, and everybody was like, "Man, you're an idiot." But who's laughing now? On the other side of this, I've got Josh Jacobs, and got rid of a guy that's barely had 9 fantasy points every game. So it feels good. He had 28 fantasy points, 106 yards, 3 touchdowns, 26 carries. My question to you, Matt, is it's a short week for them. They play on Friday. Do you think Josh Jacobs can keep up this pace of work, especially if it's supposed to be snowing, 11 degrees, which means you're going to be running the ball? I mean, do you think he can? He had cramps even in this game. Do you think he can do it?
I really do, and like you were kind of talking about, a lot of people gave you a lot of backlash for trading ETN for Jacobs, but when you've got a player of this caliber going to an offense like the Packers have, there's just going to be success. And it was kind of the touchdowns just weren't coming early. It's not that he wasn't having a good workload, he wasn't rushing the ball well. He's always had this workload. The touchdowns just weren't coming. So you kind of could predict that running back 1 for an offense of this caliber is going to end the season strong. And man, he did. Last game he had 3 touchdowns, and that's the best game of his season. But he's had a fantastic season.
Yeah.
He's rushing the ball well. He's involved in the passing game, which I think is such a big factor for fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And going forward, I think he's a solidified top 5 running back in the league, and for fantasy anyways. And I don't think you can say any more things about him. He's going to be great, and he's going to produce for your team on a week-to-week basis.
When you've got that kind of volume on a good team where you can get close to the goal line, we knew it would come in terms of show up on a fantasy team looking good. So I'm thankful it's been that way, and I agree with you. I think it'll continue. Just because this Green Bay offense, they're legit. They're not bad at all. And they pull it through against Mr. Brandon Allen. But on the 49ers side, I want to talk about one of our top 5 tight ends who performed, Mr. George Kittle. I think this is the only guy that you can kind of feel comfortable starting, maybe CMC, even though it's kind of been wishy-washy here in these last few games. Because I think if Brock Purdy's out and they have a backup, tight ends are like their security blanket. It feels like that's always the case. And thankfully, you have one of the best security blankets you can have in George Kittle at tight end. He had 6 receptions, 82 yards, and a touchdown. He's had a great season. I mean, real quickly, tell me what you think about if there's a backup up there, he's the guy, right? I mean, don't you agree?
Yeah. I mean, George Kittle, he's obviously been I mean, it's tough because Brock Powers has had just such a good year, but George Kittle is definitely the tight end 2. He's obviously top 3 at least, but it seems like every game he plays, he has high volume. He usually gets in the end zone, and I don't see how anybody could be disappointed with this guy. He's been the number 1 target on this team since Ayuk got injured, and outside of him, you have Jawan Jennings, who had a good couple weeks there, and I think he'll continue to have good weeks. But if Brandon Allen's going to be their starting quarterback, Kittle is going to be the only guy in the receiving game that you can really trust on a game-to-game basis. And I think Christian will pick it up. But if Brock continues to be out and this offense continues to struggle, I would even be scared of CMC. And that's not to downplay how good of a player he is. It's just when your offense is struggling and you get down by so much, you're going to be passing the ball a ton. So I just think Kittle is such a good option and such a good fantasy player that you can play him every single week and have full confidence in him.
Yeah, 100% agree. There's not much else you can say about the guy. He's just a dog. He's a great tight end. They're going to stack the box against CMC because they know he's the guy to worry about, especially with the receiver hurts, the injuries in their receiver room. With the backup quarterback that's not going to produce, if they can just stack the box and try to get a sack or stop CMC, they're going to do it. But I think the only guy, not the only guy, but the guy who will benefit the most from that is George Kittle. All right, number 3 on our running back list. We've kind of got a few of these guys left here, but one of the 2 names I think I would never see on these lists. Bucky Irving is our number 3 running back with 27 fantasy points. He had the same amount of carries as Rachaad White, but turned it into 87 yards instead of 37. He had a touchdown, and the biggest piece, he was 6 for 6 and 64 yards in the air. Bucky Irving had a great game. I'm loving how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers they're just looking good this year. I know they're 5-6, but they could sneak up and win that division easily. But I did want to say, I know you'll talk about Bucky Irving here in a sec. The Tampa Bay defense is a defense to pick up for the rest of this year. And I say that looking towards the playoffs because they've got a pretty easy schedule. They play the Carolina Panthers. Who else? I need to look at this because I just was looking at it the other day.
I'll
So
look at it for you.
Raiders, Panthers, both terrible teams, especially with the quarterback issues. Chargers is a tough one. Okay, they could be good. Cowboys, Panthers again, and the New Orleans Saints. Talk about a decent schedule to stream a defense. So if you're hurting a defense out there, this is a team you can look forward to going to the playoffs. Good waiver wire pickup. A lot of people haven't picked them up because their defense has been wishy-washy. But at least for the rest of this year and schedule, they look pretty good. But talk to me about Bucky Irving here, Matt.
Yeah, there's not much more you can say about him. He has completely taken over this load in Tampa, and Rachaad White's still going to get looks. I mean, he had 12 carries this game, which is the same as Bucky, but Bucky was utilized a lot more in the passing game, and that's really what Rachaad White has been so good at these past couple of years in Tampa. But I think you see Bucky's just a more explosive player. It is going to continue to be a split backfield, but Bucky's going to be more involved in the passing game going forward, in my opinion. And during this game, you saw all 3 running backs got a tight end, or I mean, got a touchdown in this game.
Yeah.
And that is just wild. When you have 3 running backs on your team get a touchdown in the same game, and really there should have been another one for Sean Tucker, but he fumbled the ball on the goal line. So with that fumble, I really think it just propels Bucky even further up the depth chart. And I think Bucky's going to be a guy that you can just play full confidence. It's a great offense. They're gonna be throwing the ball a ton, but when you get in the red zone, I think Bucky's going to be able to get in the end zone more times than not. So I would play him with full confidence, especially with the downfall of Rachaad White. Not that he's playing terrible, but Bucky's just a more explosive player.
100% agree. A guy I don't think any of us would have thought. I mean, we kind of had an idea that he would be good, but we thought Rachaad White would be the same as last year. It's completely not been the case. He's been kind of just a middling running back, and Bucky Irving takes a lot of that load. So, yeah, that's number 3 on our list. Number 4, I know this guy is somebody you will enjoy talking about. I like the other side of this running back group, but Mr. Jahmyr Gibbs with 25 fantasy points. What a team. This Lions team is dangerous. They really are. I know they played the Colts, but Jahmyr Gibbs had 90 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 for 3 and 9 yards. Now, the big piece of this team is David Montgomery. They have 2 top running backs in the top 10, which is insane. This is one of the first times it's ever. Wait, I think it was the first duo in a long time to have like 1,000 yards each in 2 seasons back to back, or maybe the only one ever. I think they broke a record with that. But Jahmyr Gibbs could have a solo backfield coming up. David Montgomery left this game halfway through with a shoulder injury. He's questionable. It's looking in the right direction, but if he's out, Jahmyr Gibbs just only benefits from the workload. I mean, talk to me about Mr. Jahmyr Gibbs here. I know you have this side of the team here, so.
Yeah, I mean, I do have Jahmyr in the redraft, and then I have David in the dynasty. So I love both players. They're both fantastic rushing the ball. And you kind of thought coming into the year that Jahmyr was going to be the primary receiving back. But I mean, I think you've seen over the year that David Montgomery is just as good in the passing game. So if David Montgomery truly does miss this next game, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a solidified running back 1. I think he has potential to finish running back 1 over the week. He's never got this workload before, and you saw just with the limited time that David missed last game, he was just fantastic for fantasy teams. And David had the shoulder injury. He said he was good for next game, but it is such a short week. They play on Thursday. and their coach Dan Campbell came out and said they're not really going to be taking many chances. So that leads me to believe that David might miss the game. But David said he's good, so if he truly is good, expect him to be out there. But it's just a situation to monitor. If it's Jahmyr Gibbs solely in the backfield, he's gonna just explode for fantasy points.
Caught me in a yawn there. Dang it, Matt. It's all right.
My
No,
bad. Should have went a couple seconds longer.
no, you're good. You're good. Jahmyr Gibbs will benefit. He can only benefit with this offense, how good they've been, how electric it's been. If David Montgomery's out, I mean, you're playing him regardless, but especially if he is, you kind of can enjoy that time. Although, if you're a David Montgomery manager, it might hurt you this week. So I hope that's not the case. Hopefully you got a backup option, but it's been fantastic where you drafted him, how good both these running backs have been, honestly. All right, last on the list, Mr. Tony Pollard. 22 fantasy points. Didn't see this one to be on the list, which is crazy. But not much to say, really, I feel like, about Tony Pollard other than he's on the list. This Titans offense just, I mean, it's been up and down, especially with quarterback change over the year with Will Levis and Mason Rudolph. They did win this game, though, against the Texans. I almost want to talk about C.J. Stroud, but I know that would lead us down a rabbit hole of how awful it's been for him. But Tony Pollard had 119 yards, a touchdown, and even with Tyjae Spears, did he play? He didn't play this game, right?
No.
I think the one caution I want to say about Tony Pollard is if Tyjae Spears comes back and really kind of begins to at least take some of this workload, it could affect the value of Tony Pollard. I mean, how do you feel about that? Do you think he's a guy to just keep trusting in?
Yeah, I do, and that's not because he's just an amazing player, but I mean, I think you've seen when he gets this workload, he is just going to be productive. And it, like you said, it's not a great team, but they are just rushing the ball a ton. And even with Tajay Spears back, he's really only in there for pass catching situations. So Pollard's still going to get all the rushing attempts. So I think he's a guy that's kind of, I mean, matchup dependent in a sense that he's not going to have huge weeks if they're playing a great rush defense. But if they're playing a rush defense that's not top tier, he's going to put up great points, probably 15 a game. And it's just a guy that's consistent and you can play on a week to week basis.
Yeah. I mean, we thought at the beginning of the year was a 50-50. We were really confused. Like these were guys we both let kind of just drop down quite a bit. So there were dudes that were like, well, it is what it is. What are we doing over there in Arkansas, sir? What's going on here? No, but Tony Pollard, little surprise there for me. I almost had an opportunity to trade for him. Shut it down for Mr. David Montgomery. Maybe I should have. I probably shouldn't have, but it is what it is. All right, we're going to jump into receiver, and we're going to talk about one of our tight ends on the list. Number one receiver, top 5 fantasy points. You'll never guess. Jordan Addison. What a name to be talking about in the top 5 here. 26 fantasy points, 9 targets, 8 receptions, 162 yards, and a touchdown. I was so excited. I thought Justin Jefferson was going to pop off, and he got 3 fantasy points. 2 catches, 5 targets, 27 yards. Terrible production. But Jordan Addison was on the other side of this. And our tight end at number 5 with, what was it, 18 fantasy points, 7 receptions, 9 targets, 114 yards, TJ Hawkinson. So, Matt, talk to me about this Vikings team. To see not Justin Jefferson at the top of this, but Mr. Jordan Addison.
Yeah, I think this was a direct result of Jalen Johnson being on Jefferson. He's probably one of the best corners in the league, especially when he's shadowing one of the best receivers. So I don't think this is a situation where Jefferson's struggling. He just happened to have one of the best corners in the league guarding in this game.
Yeah.
And Addison connected with Darnold on a few of those deep attempts, and it just led to huge production. And the same thing goes for TJ Hawkinson. When their top guy, Jefferson, is getting kind of taken out of the game by Jalen Johnson, it leads to great opportunity for them to have a good week. And I think it's going to kind of continue next week where Jefferson becomes the lead guy again and TJ or Addison kind of falls out of their moment. So I don't think they're guys that you can consistently start. I think TJ, I would have more faith in him than Addison. But going forward, you can expect Jefferson to be as good as he was.
I hope so. That's why I went and got the man. Mr. Alvin Kamara, had to leave him but we brought in the J Jettas. Yeah, it's a sad game in terms of if you have Justin Jefferson, but to see, I have TJ Hawkinson, didn't start him, but to see that he's kind of looking like he used to, you love to see it, and I hope that continues for him. On the Jordan Addison side, I could care less if he does good or bad. I mean, he's not really a guy I just think of when I talk about top receiver. He's a secondary guy on this team. He probably would be a lot better somewhere else as a number one, but it's just the what happens when you have a guy like Justin Jefferson on the field. He makes other people better, but he's just that guy. Next receiver, I'm actually kind of excited to talk about this name. Number two on our list out of our top five. We kind of talked about the rest of them. But Cortland Sutton, with 30 fantasy points, flirting with him in PPR, 8 receptions, 10 targets, 97 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I would have never guessed this at the beginning of the season from last year's rapport. But this guy finally has kind of looked like almost honestly a receiver one for fantasy teams in some ways. I mean, talk to me about that. He's the guy on this team. They're finally targeting him. They're finally looking his way, and it looks like it's a guy you can trust in every week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else there is to say about him. He's
Yeah.
We were kind of skeptical of him. We had a guy in our league trade for him, and everybody was kind of just confused on why he did that. But since he's made that trade, Cortland Sutton's been a top 10 receiver, and I truly think he's going to continue to be that. Bo Nix is playing great, and with Sean Payton at the helm of this offense, he is such a good scheme maker, and he's going to draw up plays for Cortland Sutton. And I think he's going to be targeted in the end zone, and he's just Bo Nix's guy.
Yeah.
Really nothing else to say about that. And with Bo Nix's success comes Cortland Sutton's success. So I think you're going to kind of see that correlate, and his success is going to continue. I know I've been a Bo Nix hater, but there comes a point where you have to just admit you're wrong. And I know he might not have the ceiling of some of these other rookie quarterbacks, but when you're playing at a level like he is, you just can't deny it. And he's playing great, and that in turn turns to success for Cortland Sutton.
Yeah. He's had 4 games where he had below 10 fantasy points. Other than that, rest of the season, he's had above 10 fantasy points. He's honestly had a really decent year, kind of a sneaky year. But he's receiver 9 in terms of in receiver. That's crazy to think of, especially with this year of the receivers that we thought were going to be the guys like Tyreek Hill or like CeeDee Lamb. It just hasn't gone that way. I mean, obviously there's your Jamar Chase and your Justin Jefferson and those kind of receivers. Amon-Ra has been crazy, but if you got Cortland Sutton and he's done what he's done this year for you, you're nothing but ecstatic for the guy. So it's exciting to see him at number 2 for that top 5 receivers. Last but not least, we have one more guy to talk about in our top 5 in terms of, and it's in the tight end position, Mr. Trey McBride. The man balled out. You thought it'd be Marvin Harrison Jr., which, I mean, I'm sure if we talked about him, that's a whole nother conversation. He's been a dud all year, it feels like, except for a few games. But this man had 133 yards, 15 targets, and 12 receptions. You're super ecstatic about getting this guy. 20 fantasy points, 25 fantasy points at PPR. Half PPR, it was 19. But, I mean, obviously, like you said, I feel like there's not too much to say, but he's the guy that you can trust in on this Arizona Cardinal offense.
Yeah, I mean, on the season so far, he has 80 targets. So, I mean, you're going to see a season where he's getting 120 plus targets. And if you're getting that amount, you're going to have a super productive fantasy season. And say what you want about Kyler, he's a good quarterback and he gets Trey McBride the ball. The only thing that you've been disappointed with is the touchdowns. They just haven't came for Trey. But if he's going to put up this amount of yardage every week and he just racks up these receptions. And if you're in a half PPR or a full PPR, he is just such a good player. And I don't think you can say much more about him. He's obviously a top 3 in tight ends this year. The only guys that kind of have been better is Brock Bowers and Kittle. But if you had this guy, I think the early returns you were disappointed, but as the season's gone on, he has just been so consistent and good on a week-to-week basis for you.
Yeah, I think especially with the tight end misses that we've had this year, which you can't predict these things really at the end of the day, but you got to be happy with what you've gotten from Trey McBride. especially he was on the end of that top five tight ends that we thought were going to be the guys. So you can't. I mean, you got to be happy of what you got from him, and I think it's only going to increase. I think they've realized Marvin Harrison. I mean, obviously he's a top guy, and I think he'll be good in the future. But he hasn't been the guy you think he would have been. Trey McBride at least is consistent, and he's shown it last year, and I think he'll continue to do that on this team. So, but that is all of our top fives. I'll run through them again real quick so you know. Okay, quarterback top five, we had Jaden Daniels, Patrick Mahomes, Tua Tagovailoa, Caleb Williams, Mr. Lamar Jackson. Our running backs, it was Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Bucky Irving, Jameer Gibbs, Tony Pollard. Receivers, we had Jordan Addison, Cortland Sutton, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, and Keenan Allen. What a list. And tight ends, Trey McBride, Jonnu Smith, Noah Gray, George Kittle, and TJ Hawkinson. What a list of people, guys we didn't think would be on there, guys we know will be on there. But that is it for us. We hope you all have a fantastic Thanksgiving. We will see you again. I believe we're going to be on here Saturday. I mean, you never know with us. We're busy men, working men, right? And we'll be full of food from Thanksgiving, so there's no telling. But we'll recap, and we'll be excited to see you again soon. So have a good Thanksgiving. Enjoy some football and take a nap, just for me, right? Take a nap out there. Best part of Thanksgiving, no doubt in my mind. We will catch you here later on. Have a good rest of your week.